May 2025, Saitama, Japan. Two Chinese men crashed into a line of 10 elementary school children and ran. What kind of tourist does that? Japan once welcomed travelers with open arms. But now, many Japanese are quietly asking, is this still our country? Foreign tourist numbers are at a record high, but along with them come broken rules, disrespect, and cultural damage. Tourists climb on sacred stones, talk loudly in temples, break toilets, disrespect shrines, and treat Japan like a cheap amusement park. And here's the shocking part. Most aren't even here for the culture. They're here because Japan is cheap. So what happens when a country becomes too affordable and too polite to say no? Today, we'll explore how Japan's tourism boom may be destroying the very beauty people came to see. And we'll ask, what should Japan do before it's too late? Let's begin. Section 1. Japan is not a cheap theme park. So why are foreigners treating it like one? What happens when travelers visit a country only because it's cheap and act like the culture doesn't matter? They laugh loudly at temples. They climb old stone walls. They touch everything, even when signs say not to. They lie down in front of shrines or swing from torii gates. Not out of curiosity but carelessness. I've seen this with my own eyes. And many others in Japan have, too. So we ask, is this how people treat a place they respect? Not all tourists are like this, but bad behavior is clearly growing, especially in quiet places like Kyoto and Nara, where people come to reflect, not to perform. These travelers aren't here for deep understanding. They're here for the price tag. They don't study customs. They don't ask what's appropriate. They don't notice they're disturbing others. Because they didn't come for the culture. They came for the bargain. And that changes everything. When price is the reason for travel, respect often disappears. So let's ask, if you saw someone do this in your hometown, climbing statues, stepping on graves, would you be okay with it? Would you stay silent? Then why is it allowed in Japan? Japan isn't perfect, but it deserves the same level of basic courtesy as any other country in the world. So next time someone says Japan is cheap now, maybe the real question is, what kind of traveler do you want to be? Section 2. Japan hit a tourism record, but at what cost? 4 million foreign visitors came to Japan in a single month. 4 million. That's a new record. But is anyone asking what it's costing us? Shrines are more crowded than ever. Historic towns like Takayama, Kanazawa, and Nara are flooded with rental kimonos, rolling suitcases, and selfie sticks. And the people who live there, they quietly step aside. On paper, it looks like a success story. Japan is popular again. Hotels are full. Shops are busy. The numbers look amazing. But numbers don't show noise. They don't show disrespect. They don't show the quiet frustration of local people who no longer feel at home in their own streets. Overtourism doesn't always come with violence. Sometimes, it comes with a smile, but still leaves damage behind. When you can't hear the wind in a temple anymore, when moss is worn down by foreign feet, when the silence of a shrine is filled with shouting, what part of the culture is left? Some cities are trying to limit visitors. Others raise entrance fees. But that's just a band-aid. Because the real issue isn't numbers. It's attitude. Travel should be about learning, not consuming. But too many visitors treat Japan like a product. A cheap, polite, Instagrammable background. And when they leave, they take pictures, but leave the damage behind. So we ask again, what is this record-breaking tourism boom really costing us? And what are we willing to lose just to say we hit a new high? Section 3. Why is tourist behavior getting worse? Why does it feel like tourist behavior is getting worse every year? Is it just imagination or is something changing? More and more, you see loud voices in temples, people eating in front of altars, climbing castle walls, touching ancient statues, even sitting on private doorsteps for selfies. They ignore signs. They ignore rules. Sometimes, they ignore other people completely. But why? Some say it's just different cultures. But let's be honest, no culture teaches you to be rude at someone else's home. It's not about culture, it's about awareness, and sometimes, about arrogance. Social media plays a role. Many travelers come not to learn, but to post, to show off, to say, "Look where I am," without asking, "How should I act here?" The goal isn't connection, it's content. And tourism today moves fast. Group tours, tight schedules, no time to understand, just time to take photos and move on. This rush leads to thoughtlessness, and thoughtlessness leads to damage. But here's the truth, even without studying Japanese culture, a little basic respect is enough. If someone simply watched how others behave, they'd know not to shout, or climb, or step on moss. So we have to ask, is it really that hard to travel with respect? Or have we normalized the idea that money is enough to excuse anything? Japan isn't perfect, no country is, but respect is free, and without it, even the most beautiful places will eventually be destroyed. Section 4: Why no one says stop and why tourists must be the adults. Why does no one in Japan ever say stop to bad behavior? Is it just politeness or is it something deeper? A tourist shouts in a quiet temple. Locals glance, sigh, and say nothing. Someone climbs a statue or sits on a shrine. No one dares to intervene. At first glance, it seems cultural. Japanese people avoid confrontation. They value harmony. They don't want to embarrass others. But that's not the full story. There's another reason no one speaks up: fear. Foreign tourists are often bigger, louder, and more confident. And most Japanese people can't respond in English. So when someone behaves aggressively, the average person feels powerless. It's not just manners, it's intimidation. This is why tourists must act with extra care. You are not just a guest. You are someone people might be afraid to correct. When the host can't speak up, the guest must step up. Tourists who assume silence means approval are deeply mistaken. The silence comes from discomfort, and that discomfort builds. It builds into resentment, and it quietly ruins the experience for everyone. So here's the real question. Are you visiting to learn or to dominate? If you wouldn't shout or climb in your own country, don't do it here. If you see no one else doing something, maybe there's a reason. Being polite isn't weakness, it's restraint, and that restraint deserves respect. Section 5: We were once the problem too. Japan's forgotten tourist past. Before we blame others, we have to remember something uncomfortable. Japan was once just as bad. In the 1980s and 90s, Japanese tourists flooded Southeast Asia. They stayed in expensive hotels. They bought luxury goods. They bragged about how cheap everything was. Locals saw them as arrogant, rude, even exploitative. There were even organized tours for sex. It was a national embarrassment. Many Japanese treated those countries like playgrounds. Not with respect, but with money. Sound familiar? It's easy to forget this now. But we were once the bad tourists. We were the ones who didn't care to learn the language, who laughed too loud, who acted as if the world was ours to enjoy. That's why this issue isn't about Japan versus the world. It's about the dangers of privilege. When you visit a country that feels cheaper, smaller, or weaker than your own. And now, Japan has become that place. A weak yen, clean streets, polite people who won't fight back. To some, that's the perfect playground. But we know where that road leads. We've been there. That's why Japan must respond with wisdom, not just anger. We must set boundaries, but without hatred. We must protect what matters, without forgetting that we once crossed the line too. So instead of shouting at bad tourists, maybe we should say this: you're welcome here, but only if you care. Section 6: Would you notice if you were being disrespectful in Japan? Here's a question for you. If you were being disrespectful in Japan, would you even notice? In many countries, rules are clearly spoken. Signs are bold, warnings are loud, and people tell you right away when you cross the line. But in Japan, it's different. Rules are often unspoken. Disapproval comes in silence, not shouting. A glance, a pause, a quiet sigh. That's all. So what happens? Tourists don't realize they've done something wrong. No one corrects them. No one explains. They leave thinking, everyone was so polite, but were they really welcome? Or did no one feel safe enough to speak up? This is the challenge with cross-cultural travel. What feels normal in one place can feel deeply offensive in another. For example, is it okay to touch sacred ornaments at a shrine? To enter someone's private property for a better photo? To block a narrow path or doorway with your group? To walk into a clearly marked "Do Not Enter" area? In your country, maybe yes. In Japan, definitely not. But if no one tells you, how would you know? That's why cultural sensitivity matters. Not perfection, just awareness. The most respectful travelers aren't the ones who know everything. They're the ones who ask, is this okay here? So let me ask you, in your country, do people speak up fast? Or stay quiet, like in Japan? And if it's different, are you willing to adapt? Section 7: Who pays to protect Japan's heritage, and why it deserves more respect. Temples don't survive for centuries by accident. Shrines don't stay sacred on their own. Castles don't weather storms and earthquakes without effort. Behind every beautiful site in Japan, there are people quietly, patiently protecting it. Elders sweep stone paths at dawn. Craftsmen restore roofs with traditional tools. Communities raise funds and pay taxes to preserve what time has left behind. And then, a visitor arrives. Most come with good intentions. But some leave behind more than footprints. Some scratch their names into pillars. Some climb torii gates for photos. Some kick sacred stones or enter areas marked "Do Not Enter." In a few cases, there have been hateful messages carved into ancient wood, especially at temples registered as World Heritage Sites. Some came from foreign visitors. Some included anti-Japanese slurs. These are not just acts of disrespect. They are permanent damage, damage that can't simply be erased. The materials are old. The surface is fragile. If you try to remove graffiti, you risk destroying original paint, scraping away the grain of centuries. What's lost cannot return. And yet, the people who care for these places remain silent. They clean, they fix, they pay, they carry the burden quietly. But what they want isn't revenge. They're not asking for anger. They're asking for understanding. These places are more than tourist spots. They are memory, they are history, and they are fragile. So if you visit Japan, take your photos, enjoy the beauty, but most of all, treat it like someone's home. Because it is. Section 8: Should foreign tourists pay more? The case for a two-tier system. Is it unfair to charge foreign tourists more than locals? At first, it might sound like discrimination. But let's think about what's really happening. Shrines, temples, and castles cost money to maintain. A lot of money. And that money doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from Japanese taxpayers. Locals pay for the roads tourists walk on. They fund the trash collection after festivals. They subsidize the preservation of national treasures. But tourists? They enjoy the results without sharing the cost. That's why some cities are starting to act. Himeji Castle, one of Japan's most famous landmarks, considered raising the entry fee for foreigners to $30. Not as a punishment, but as a way to reflect the true cost of preservation. Other cities have introduced lodging taxes, charging tourists per night to support local infrastructure. Some propose special tourism fees, specifically for foreign visitors. And maybe that's not a bad idea, because the current system isn't equal either. It's just unequal in the opposite direction. When tourists crowd temples, wear down mosques, block pathways, and leave trash behind, the cost is paid by locals, not visitors. So what's more unfair? Charging tourists a little more? Or asking locals to silently cover the damage? Two-tier pricing already exists in places like Thailand and Egypt. And no one calls that racism. So maybe Japan isn't being rude. Maybe it's just time to be realistic. If you love Japan, if you truly value what it preserves, then helping protect it shouldn't feel like a burden. Section 9: More isn't better. Why Japan should attract fewer, but better tourists. Is having more tourists always a good thing? That's what governments want us to believe. Big numbers look like success. 4 million visitors in 1 month. Headlines celebrate it, but no one asks what those numbers mean. More tourists mean more crowding, more noise, more damage, more pressure on places that were never built for this scale. And often, more tourists mean fewer respectful ones. Because when a country becomes cheap and easy, it stops attracting the people who truly care. It becomes a background, a playground, a checklist stop. But Japan is not a cheap theme park. It's a country with deep history, living traditions, and fragile beauty. So maybe it's time to ask, is it really success if the people who come don't even see what they're standing on? Instead of chasing record numbers, maybe Japan should aim for something else. Fewer visitors, but the right kind. The kind who read before they arrive. The kind who walk carefully. Who listen before they speak. Who say thank you, not just on camera, but in their hearts. These visitors don't just take, they give. They bring curiosity, kindness, and respect. And maybe that's the kind of tourism Japan deserves. Section 10. Welcome, but only with respect. Let's be clear. Japan is not trying to shut anyone out. This isn't about nationalism. It's about preservation. Preserving peace. Preserving culture. Preserving the simple joy of being able to walk through a quiet shrine without hearing someone shout into a phone. This country has spent decades building a delicate balance between modern progress and ancient values, between global openness and quiet dignity. And today, that balance is under threat. We welcome you, we really do, but we need you to meet us halfway. Not just with money, but with manners. Not just with photos, but with presence. Not just with expectations, but with empathy. Japan doesn't demand perfection. It simply asks for respect. Because when you touch a sacred stone, you're not just touching a rock. You're touching hundreds of years of memory. When you enter someone's space, you're not just entering a photo spot. You're entering someone's daily life. Tourism should not be a form of consumption. It should be a form of connection. Japan welcomes you, truly, but only if we can welcome each other with respect, not as consumers and providers, but as guests and hosts. Not with entitlement, but with gratitude. Because in the end, hospitality is not about opening every door. It's about opening the right ones, for the right reasons, to the right people, and those who understand that are always welcome in Japan. What do you think about this part of Japanese culture? Is it the same where you live or totally different? I'd love to hear your thoughts or questions in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next one.